Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. I'm Robert Parsons, and my guest today is someone who's been at the thick of efforts to reach an agreement with Iran on its nuclear program. Salome Zurabishvili is a career diplomat who's currently coordinator of the UN panel of experts on sanctions against Iran. Thanks very much for being on the program.
Thank you.
This is being described as a historic agreement, and at the centre of that agreement have been sanctions. Is it fair to say, despite what some people have been saying, that sanctions never work, that in this case, sanctions have really worked?
I think it's fair to say that sanctions have worked and will work. I think that the example that we've had now with Iran means that sanctions are with us for quite some time in the coming crisis that we will have in other parts of the world, because sanctions, first of all, they are the only alternative to the use of force. And use of force is no longer showing that it can solve many of the problems that...
The Iranians themselves say, we're not doing this because of the sanctions.
They've been saying that all along. They first denied any legitimacy to the sanctions. They never wanted to have anything to do with us, which is understandable. But at the same time, they've always asked for the lifting of sanctions. And it's very interesting that at the end of the negotiations, their main request, demand, was the lifting of the sanctions, the lifting of the removal of the committee, of the panel, of everything that reminded in any way of sanctions. So, of course, it's not only the UN sanctions, first of all, and it's as much or even more the so-called unilateral sanctions, American, European, but it's this network of sanctions that has worked. It is a fact that the permanent members, the 5 permanent members, have been together on that from the beginning to the end, and nobody has had afterthoughts on this issue. And the fact that no member state, and we were dealing directly with all the member states of the UN who, under Chapter 7, had to implement those sanctions, no member state has openly contested the sanctions. So everybody was more or less applying the sanctions.
I suppose one of the ironies of the sanctions, however effective we might or not agree that they've been, is that the people who suffered most from the sanctions, Iran, were the most vulnerable, the poor, to a degree the middle class as well.
This time, the UN sanctions were targeted to directly the nuclear program and trying to prevent Iran from acquiring what it needed for the nuclear program, and tried to punish only the people that were involved directly in the program. But then, of course, it was enlarged, especially by the unilateral sanctions. What it's important to say is that sanctions, when we say they are efficient or they have been efficient, like in this case, they are unable to reach everything by themselves and to achieve everything. They were unable to change the mind of the Iranians. They were unable to stop the nuclear program. They were only able to make this program more costly, more difficult.
It gave the Iranians an incentive, essentially.
It gave them an incentive, and it gave the negotiators, who did a great job, we did the main job, the time to negotiate. Otherwise, and without the sanctions, Iran would have reached its aim much earlier, and maybe it wouldn't have been ready for the negotiations.
Just now you mentioned the other sanctions that are in place, the unilateral sanctions, because this deal isn't about lifting them at all, is it? This is about lifting the UN sanctions.
And it's not immediate.
Yeah.
The lifting of the UN sanctions will happen in 6 to 9 months. Whenever the IEA will say, I'm satisfied that Iran has delivered its commitments. It's very interesting that it's a deal that is not based on trust. It's a deal that is based on donnant-donnant, give and take.
Yes.
And at every stage, it will be verified whether what Iran is doing is in accordance with the text, and then they get the relief that they're supposed to get.
So if you're an Iranian today, when can you start to expect to notice sanctions relief coming through?
Probably quite soon, because the climate will be different, the atmosphere will be different. But the real main results will be probably by the beginning of next year. But we also know that a number of companies that were didn't want to take the risk. They were in fields that were not prohibited, but they were refraining themselves because they didn't want to be at risk of being under some sanctions or the US retributions. So this is going to start quite soon, because a number of them have been already visiting Tehran, signing MOUs, and are ready to move.
Why was it? Because we were all listening in the last few days of the talks. One of the big obstacles was the issue of the arms embargo. Why did the arms embargo become such a key issue? Bearing in mind that as recently as June, UN experts said there have been no violations of the arms embargo agreement at all.
We said, because no country reported. But we all knew that there were arms exports from Iran to Yemen, to Iraq, to Syria. That was well known. But again, the member states obviously didn't want to have this issue as an issue that would stop the negotiations or be. It was a diplomatic gesture almost. But at the same time, everybody was aware this existed in the resolutions, so we have to say something about it. It was not included in the GCPOA, in the former interim agreement. So it had to be dealt with, and now it's dealt with within not the GCPOA agreement, but within the resolution that will be adopted next week, and within the standalone statement that is annexed to it. So it's an architecture of documents which is quite striking and quite interesting. It must have been extremely complicated to negotiate all of that at the same time, because they are reflecting one upon another. Can we trust the Iranians? So that's the big question people are asking themselves. We do not trust them. The international community at this stage does not trust them, does not give them the keys to the house, but give them a chance to come back as a trusted part of the international community if they, at each step in the coming first 1 year, and then 10 years, and then 15 years. So it's quite a long period. And what is very interesting is the invention of these negotiations, the snapback of the sanctions, which allows to put them back, and which does away with the possibility of a veto of one of the permanent members, which is completely new. But how effective do you think snapback will be? Because one can imagine, for instance, that the Iranians might make little petty violations, small violations of the sanctions. At that point, nobody's going to say, "Oh, we insist on snapback." There probably will be petty violations, if only because some parts of the Iranian leadership will want to test so I think we can expect that. The snapback is for substantial violation. It's for the member states of the Security Council when they are convinced that Iran is not playing the game. So Iran is not trusted, but it's given a chance to play the game. So let's see if it plays the game. And now, what about Congress? That's the other side of this equation. Congress is going to be hard to get. But I think that in the end, the conviction of the administration is probably that they will get them. That seems to be the expectation. But for the sake of argument, let's suppose that Congress gets more than 2/3 of its members in favor of keeping the sanctions in place. What effect does that have on this agreement? Well, it unravels the agreement. It's a catastrophe, in my view, and it's a huge responsibility because, as we said at the beginning, these negotiations are a success and especially are the only alternative to what we all knew would have been a completely not to be expected and very dramatic developments. It would blow a hole, presumably, in any international cooperation on the issue of Iran. in any international cooperation. In the region, we don't know how that will play. So it's a huge responsibility, and I understand that that will be what the American administration will play with the Congress to put them in front of their responsibility, not only on this issue, but in general on what they decide will have consequences that nobody can predict.
I imagine regardless of what Congress decides, the other members, the other people who are party to this agreement will carry on in any case.
Yes, and President Obama also said that he would put his veto.
Yeah.
So I'm not a specialist of how this Congress and veto things work.
They need to get a two-thirds majority.
But he is determined to do the maximum of what can be done, and he will be in that supported by both Kerry and Biden. I mean, the whole strength of the administration will be put in this very difficult negotiation. They have not finished with negotiating, but I would take the bet.
And what about the UN panel of experts where you worked?
We're finished, not today, but we will be finished together with the resolutions of the UN. So as soon as IAEA says that Iran has satisfied to the first set of measures, nuclear measures that they're supposed to take, that would be sometime end of the year, beginning of next year, first trimester of next year. Then everything that existed in the UN as part of the sanctions system disappears.
So at this stage, you're feeling optimistic about the future of this agreement? I think that one can. Okay. Oh, well, thanks very much, Salome Zurabishvili, for being on the interview. That's all we have time for today. Viewers, thank you too for being on the interview. Don't go away. More news and headlines to follow.
Thank you.